So our last keynote address comes from Kevin Knobloch. He serves as Chief of Staff at the United States Department of Energy, where he directs the Office of the Secretary and helps to oversee the federal agency. Kevin has more than 37 years of experience in public policy, government, advocacy, and media. Please help me welcome Kevin Knobloch and his keynote speech, Energy Security and U.S. Prosperity.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's really a delight to be with all of you here in Snowmass and to be able to talk about renewables. Even though I'm from Massachusetts, I consider Colorado to be my adopted state. Jennifer didn't have a chance to mention, but it's in my bio that I had the privilege of working for Tim Wirth in the House and the Senate back in the 80s. And it was indeed a privilege, and it's so fun to see Tim here today as well. The precedent-setting Paris Agreement last December showed that the world is really starting to step up to the challenges of climate change. It is now the policy of 195 countries, virtually every country in the world, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our own so-called nationally determined contribution target, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 26 to 28% by 2025, is complemented by other bold goals established by President Obama, generating 80% of our electricity from a diverse set of clean energy resources and doubling our energy productivity by 2030, for example. Under President Obama's leadership, we have been aggressively driving toward these goals through 2 rounds of strengthened fuel economy standards for passenger vehicles and 2 new rounds for medium and heavy-duty trucks, through the diverse and extensive Climate Action Plan, which the President launched just 3 years ago, almost to the day, and the administration's Clean Power Plan, an historic blueprint for reducing carbon pollution from new and existing power plants. The Clean Power Plan is projected to reduce carbon emissions by 32% in the power sector by 2030. And under this plan, we expect to see a doubling of utility-scale solar and wind capacity. While the plan is being challenged in the courts, we believe it stands on a solid legal foundation and will be upheld. And here's really the key message I want to convey. The role of dramatically expanding renewable energy is central to the success of the Paris Agreement, and it's central to the success of the Clean Power Plan. And the success of both of those ambitious initiatives is critical to give us a fighting chance to stabilize our climate. In fact, we need to overcomply in both of those initiatives. The ambition that's reflected in both of those initiatives would likely have been significantly less if renewables, and especially wind and solar, had not performed so impressively over the last decade. And you all are familiar with that story. Today, wind and solar are the mainstream sources of new power generation. Renewable energy accounted for nearly 70% of new generating capacity added in the first half of 2015 alone, despite falling costs for natural gas. And of course, we've seen sharply dropping costs for wind and solar in that same period. In addition to this explosive expansion of wind and solar, we've seen the nation's first commercial grid-connected tidal energy project and accelerated deployment of enhanced geothermal systems. This progress is not by accident. The renewables industry has emerged as a skilled, entrepreneurial, and persistent force in this energy market penetration. In the remainder of my remarks, though, I want to focus a spotlight on the government role. Dedicated research and development in our national labs and funded through the DOE's Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Program, along with similar investments by industry, gets a lot of the credit. It goes back to the $25 billion investment by all of us taxpayers as part of the 2009 American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which, when combined with private investment, built 104,000 wind, solar, geothermal, and biomass projects with a combined capacity to power more than 8 million homes. My immediate predecessor as Chief of Staff of the Department of Energy, Brandon Hurlburt, who's just here, was on the scene with Secretary Chu when Congress appropriated $80 billion in green investment in that period, and you have to get Brandon to tell you about what that was like when suddenly they had real money to push out the door very quickly. Federal wind and solar power tax credits helped make the finances work, and the 29 state renewable energy standards helped create the market. And in a very positive development, Congress last December extended the investment tax credit and the production tax credits. A recent analysis from NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab right here in Colorado, indicates that these tax credits will lead to a 60% growth in renewables by 2021. That's a good story, but renewables will be called upon to contribute much more. And to be able to do so, the key is innovation. We need sustained and deep innovation to produce dramatic advances in technology, in systems integration, and systems in the sophistication of our systems. And just this panel we just heard from was a slice of that, taking it right down to the home and the business and the factory, along with a continued sharp reduction in costs. A major global focus on innovation was announced by President Obama and the leaders of 19 other nations last November at the first day of the Paris climate talks, when they launched Mission Innovation. Mission Innovation is a dramatic commitment to expand the clean energy innovation pipeline by doubling government research and development and then turning innovation into transformation. It was on that same event when Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Richard Branson, and 24 other investors from 10 countries pledged to invest their own money, significant private capital in clean energy, and invest earlier in the cycle and more patiently to help push these technologies into the marketplace at a large scale. Just a couple weeks ago in San Francisco, we hosted the 7th Clean Energy Ministerial, which started under Secretary Chu and President Obama back in 2010. Energy ministers from those mission innovation countries and the European Union announced combined baselines of current investment levels in clean energy R&D totaling $15 billion. So a doubling of that amount by 2021 will yield, by 2021, an annual investment of $30 billion in government funding in clean energy R&D. Now, the fact that all these countries have stepped up reveal that there is a healthy element of global competition afoot. We in the U.S. cannot take the clean energy market for granted. The nations and businesses that invent clean energy solutions stand to win a large and growing market share in what is shaping up to be a multi-trillion-dollar global economic opportunity. The President's FY17 budget proposal included a 21% increase in budget for clean energy R&D investments. This is in a flat budget year. So the President made this a priority and found those dollars in other agencies, other places. And of our clean energy investments, the Department of Energy actually has a bulk of those, 76%. So the request was for $7.7 billion in FY17 for clean energy R&D, and the DOE share is $5.9 billion. Now, this request to Congress included funding for a new concept called regional innovation partnerships. And the idea, if we can get funding, is to establish up to 10 of these across the country. Each partnership will be unique to the region that it takes root in, understanding that each region has customized resources, needs, expertise, talent. And the idea is to bring together the innovation ecosystem in each region: universities, national labs, private research, economic development organizations, investors, industry, and labor. A few weeks ago, the Senate passed its first appropriations bill of the cycle by a vote of 90 to 8. It was the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. And that bill explicitly endorsed a doubling of clean energy research and development, but it only included modest increases in actual funding. So when the House and Senate ultimately send an appropriations bill to the President, we are hopeful that it will include significantly more funding for innovation, and at stake is nothing less than America's lead in this emerging economic revolution. So back at DOE, our efforts are focused on advancing renewable technology at several points along the innovation chain. I want to give you just a few examples at each of those points in the spectrum. Offshore wind. Last month, our Energy Efficiency Renewable Energy Program identified 3 demonstration projects that are maturing, that have demonstrated significant progress toward being successfully completed and producing power. These projects are eligible for up to $40 million in additional funding if they meet specific performance milestones. Fishermen's Energy of New Jersey plans to install 4-megawatt Siemens turbines in state waters approximately 3 miles off the coast of Atlantic City, in New Jersey, of course. This wind farm will demonstrate the use of the US-designed Keystone Twisted Jacket foundation that is easier to manufacture and install than traditional foundations, helping drive down the cost of energy produced by this offshore system. The Lake Erie Energy Development Corporation Icebreaker project plans to install 6 3.45-megawatt direct drive turbines on monobucket foundations 7 miles off the coast of Cleveland in Lake Erie. The monobucket foundation was selected through significant engineering analysis and is expected to reduce installation time, costs, and environmental impacts as it does not require pile driving. And then the third one is a University of Maine project which plans to install 2 6-megawatt direct drive turbines on floating concrete semi-submersible foundations at a test site off of Monhegan Island in Maine. And because of its location in deep waters off the coast of Maine, where traditional foundations are not feasible, the University of Maine is developing an innovative floating platform. This is significant because nearly 60% of U.S. offshore wind resources are in deep waters. Another step in the innovation continuum is represented by DOE's Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA-E, which supports high-risk, high-reward research projects that could create the foundation for entirely new industries, but are too early in their development and private sector investment. One ARPA-E-funded renewable project that we are particularly excited about is called Makani Power. Makani developed an airborne wind turbine, much like an unmanned aerial vehicle or an energy kite, that eliminates 90% of the mass of a conventional wind turbine and accesses a stronger, more consistent wind at altitudes of nearly 1,000 feet. At these altitudes, 85% of the country can offer viable wind resources. Following ARPA-E's funding, Makani was acquired by Google X in 2013 and is now developing a commercial scale, a 600-kilowatt, 28-meter wingspan product capable of delivering energy at an unsubsidized cost competitive with coal. And then thirdly, our loan program office is yet another player along the innovation pathway. You'll be familiar with the loan program office from its rare failures, Solyndra, Fisker, but with only a 2% failure rate in the companies and technologies the Loan Program Office has invested in since 2009, LPO has a tremendous success story to tell. There are $30 billion out in the street funding clean energy technologies. In 2009, there were no utility-scale photovoltaic plants larger than 100 megawatts in the US. There was interest in building large utility-scale PV projects, but developers were unable to secure the necessary debt financing due to the scale and innovative nature of the projects. LPO helped address that market roadblock by providing $4.6 billion in loan guarantees to support the first 5 utility-scale PV plants, representing more than 1,500 megawatts of capacity. Since then, private markets have stepped up taken over, financing at least 28 utility-scale PV projects with no government funding, adding an additional 5,000 megawatts of clean energy capacity to the grid. And that's really the model that you like to see, where public money helps get over the early market hurdles, and then the private sector comes in and takes over. Similarly, LPO has been instrumental in launching the first commercial-scale concentrating solar power plants in the U.S. in decades, including the first projects with energy storage. Between 2010 and 2011, LPO financed 5 of the world's largest CSP projects, 2 of which have energy storage capabilities. And one example is Crescent Dunes, a 110 megawatt CSP plant near Tonopah, Nevada, which employs the first of its kind power tower technology using molten salt storage, which allows the project to generate at full capacity for up to 10 hours when the sun is not shining. And for those of you who know of projects in need, LPO has an additional $4.5 billion ready to lend, including a new initiative to fund aggregated distributed renewable energy projects. So my time is up. I did want to flag that there are other puzzle pieces here: grid modernization, energy storage, and other pieces that are really essential to us getting to where we need to go. The last thing I'll quickly flag is on the grid modernization piece is that back in 2005, Congress gave the Secretary of Energy the authority to approve cross-state transmission projects that will bring renewable energy electrons from wind and solar fields to the marketplace, so-called S1222 authority. A couple months ago, the Secretary used that authority for the first time since 2005 to essentially approve what's called the Plains and Eastern Clean Line project. Clean Line will tap abundant low-cost energy generation resources in Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle, delivering up to 4,000 megawatts of wind power across 700 miles to homes in the Mid-South and Southeast. So that's the picture from my perch in Washington, and I know we don't have questions here, but I'm happy to field questions afterwards. I thank you for your tremendous leadership and your commitment and the great energy that's represented in this room, and I look forward to the rest of the conference. Thank you.